Driver instructors of Reddit, what's the most insane thing you've seen a student do? Kid ran over a raccoon, stopped the car, and threw it in the backseat. He continued to drive like nothing happened. First time driving manual, they panic revved the engine to redline, and dropped the clutch. The car launched, then they slammed the brake without taking it out of first gear, or pushing the clutch back in. My instructor told me that he once had a student who put the handbrake on in the fast lane of a motorway when he told her to brake. My friend accidentally hit another student while still in the school's parking lot. He got his permit about a week before. Instructor said to take the left exit at a roundabout. So instead of going around the circle, the student took it straight left, turned right into oncoming traffic. I had a buddy who thought it would be a good idea on his first drive to do a U-turn. Literally just turned us 90 degrees and drive straight into a ditch. My driving instructor told me a story about a motorcycle student who managed to drive through a glass pane and up part of a staircase because he didn't let go of the throttle for some reason. My female instructor told me during the driving lesson that she had a first time driving student the week earlier, and during the lesson she had some vertebral neck issue / pinched nerve whatsoever, and basically got a headache and went blind on one eye. Poor student had to drive her to the hospital. Happened randomly, not the student's fault. Former driving instructor. I had a girl panic and hit the accelerator thinking it was the brake instructor vehicle in front of us. Driver of that vehicle turned out to be the girl's father, who was driving back to work after his lunch break. He'd just purchased the car. Another time, I was out with 3 students. The training vehicle blew a tire, so we pulled off the road and I asked if anyone knew how to change a flat tire. Blank expressions. One girl, can't we just call a guy? I explained that there might be a time/scenario when you might be without any assistance and have to rely on yourself. Then I went about explaining how to change the tire. 2 kids refused to help because they didn't want to kneel next to the car as it would get their clothes dirty. I changed the tire while they stood and watched. By their expressions, you'd think I'd just completed open heart surgery. When I asked one of the students to put the flat tire into the trunk, he asked, "So where'd you learn to do that? Were you, like, a tow truck driver or something?" Not an instructor, but my partner for the final driving test showed up drunk. Not falling down stupid drunk, mind you. Just slightly tipsy. Enough so I and the instructor knew something was up, but could reasonably blame nerves. I only know because after our test, when the instructor was out of earshot, my partner told me he shouldn't have had those drinks at his friend's house. In my driver's ed, for our final drive we got to choose a destination within X miles and drive back. My instructor was telling me of a girl who was driving to a friend's house in another town which required taking the freeway. She looks over to my teacher and asks, "Do you believe in God?" And my teacher said yes. The girl then swerves into oncoming traffic. Luckily my teacher slammed on her brake. Not an instructor, but I was in the back of the car while the other student and fellow classmate of mine, friendly but not friends, drove and the instructor was in the passenger seat. Driving next to us was a group of guys around my age. One wrote his number on a paper and held it up, and I quickly put it in my phone. Driving with my mom, still on learner's permit. We are driving on a busy road, stopped at a light in the right lane with a "No right on red" sign. She tells me to turn right when the light turns green. Light turns green, and I turn left across 2 lanes of traffic in each direction. Thank God my car accelerates quick so most of the other cars hadn't started yet. I teach performance driving, autocross and track stuff, and had a student once who would turn in and then completely let go of the wheel and catch it as it unwound when finishing the turn. I sent him home with homework. He's a good friend and usually faster than me now. He also keeps his hands on the wheel. I've instructed countless performance driving events for car guys that have not a freaking clue what they're doing, usually show up with no real driving experience, and are absolutely terrible. I didn't say I deserved to skip it, I just started my story of my first experience with the instructor. Not a driving instructor, but my own instructor told me a horror story a few years ago. One student of hers had a panic attack while going around a roundabout and passed out. The car didn't have dual steering, just brakes. so my instructor instinctively slammed the brakes on, causing them to get hit from two directions. A car ran into the back of them and another into the side as it tried to merge. They were both fine, luckily. This is something the instructor did. Middle of winter, I was in one of my driver lessons, and by this point, I pretty much had the driving thing down. We head toward a part of town that doesn't have any traffic, and she slams on her brake. We spin. It was terrifying. Nobody was hurt, everything's all good, and she explains she does that to students, so their first time is in a controlled situation. There are just far too many ways for that to go horribly wrong, and let me tell you, it didn't stop the panic when it happened to me a year later, and I was alone. I'm a driving instructor. Unfortunately, we don't have many amazing stories for you as we stop things before they happen. Any stories I have involve impatient drivers who cannot wait an extra few seconds to pass us safely, at least a once weekly occurrence. Learned drivers are super aware of holding people up. Give them a break. Not a driving instructor. Just live outside a house where the driving instructors love to teach their students to parallel park. It gets so bad, it's like coming out to watch a movie and how close they get before the driving instructor has to step in. Which is a lot. Mr. Francis is great at stepping in at the last possible second. Makes it worth buying popcorn and drinks to watch this nervous kids almost crash. Note, they cannot see us. We live in a very shaded spot by large building. We sit in our screening porch. We don't try to make too much noise. We have no reason to make the kids more nervous. I was the passenger when the incident happened. Our driving instructor forgot to mention she had issues with diabetes. She passed out when the worst of the three of us were driving. The kid driving panicked and immediately went off-road, through a fence, and into a field of cows. We hit a cow. The car was pretty much totaled. And since this was in the middle of nowhere, we didn't have a cell signal, so we had to find the owner of the cows to call 911. Our instructor was put on leave. The cow somehow walked it off and only had a few scrapes to show for her getting hit by a fucking car. And we all got to redo our training a month later with a new instructor. Not a driving instructor, but this guy I know drives a Crown Victoria, which is what most police cars are for those who don't know. The instructor, who was black, got in the car with him, and the first thing the guy said to the instructor was, "So is this your first time riding in the front of one of these things?" The instructor got out of the car and refused to test him. My dad is a driving instructor, and he told us about this time when the student was like getting super aggravated and shaky. The kid started screaming at my dad, and then he pulled over, nearly hitting two cars, jumped out of the car, and proceeded to try and force my dad to fight him. My dad got out of the passenger seat, went around to the other side, and said, "Don't let fear hold you back, come on then," and straight up told the kid to do it. The kid literally shat himself. Like full on did a crap in his pants, and that was that. I was the student, and I was scared to go on the interstate. I apparently wasn't the first nor the last. My instructor told me of a kid the day before me who wouldn't go over 45 in a 70. The instructor had to reach over and physically push the kid's foot on the gas harder. By then there was a shot ton of trucks behind him getting impatient. During my brother's test, a fire truck suddenly came speeding down the street, alarms blaring. My brother, panicking, simply stopped driving and came to a complete stop in the middle of the street as bright red death came charging at him. The instructor grabbed the wheel and managed to drive them to safety. He then calmly asked my brother, "So why did you think it was a good idea to just wait to be killed?" My brother did not pass his test. When I had my permit and was driving with my mom, we were driving on a 35 and approaching a busy road. My mom was getting a bit anxious and didn't want me to get on the busy road, so she kept on yelling at me to turn left and slow down. IDK, it was P freaky for me, but P much I turned left and hit the accelerator instead of the brake, so we turned going 40 into a neighborhood, and if a car had been parked there we would have demolished it. My female instructor told me during the driving lesson that she had a first-time driving student the week earlier, and during the lesson she had some vertebral neck issue / pinched nerve whatsoever, and basically got a headache and went blind on one eye. Poor student had to drive her to the hospital. Happened randomly, not the student's fault. Not a driving instructor, but this guy I know drives a Crown Victoria, which is what most police cars are for those who don't know. The instructor, who was black, got in the car with him, and the first thing the guy said to the instructor was, "So is this your first time riding in the front of one of these things?" The instructor got out of the car and refused to test him.